topic today is still missing, still waiting. And this evening we want you to tell us what makes you still hope for your missing loved one to return. WhatsApp your text and voice notes. Ensure your voice notes are no longer than 30 seconds to 876-997-3125. Or post on the Love 101 Facebook page, or call the studio lines at 876-968-8327 or 876-968-8328 to participate. And throughout the program, we'll share your thoughts. Here to spend the remainder of the following hour with us is Jana Patel and Bishop Dr. Damian Ffriend. Bishop Ffriend currently serves as the bishop of the new Ebenezer Tabernacle Apostolic Churches in Jamaica and is the assistant presiding bishop of the International Council of Pentecostal Ministries, headquartered in North Carolina. He has his undergraduate qualification in accounting, a master's degree in theology, a PhD in counseling psychology, a postdoctoral certification with the British Psychological Society as an occupational assessment specialist, and is an internationally trained mediator and chaplain. He's a fellow of the Life Underwriting College and CEO of Creative Insights Limited. Jana Patel is an attorney at law, a broadcaster, a musician, a mother, a daughter, and a sister. Her only sibling, Javan Patel, has been missing since January 2017. Welcome, Jana. Welcome, Bishop.
Thanks very much.
Great to have you. I think we may have lost Bishop for a second, but I know he'll be rejoining us momentarily. So I'll start with you, Jana. Tell me a little bit about the story of your brother, Javan, and his. Am I pronouncing it right, Javan?
That's correct, Javan. Right.
Okay. And he's going missing. Share a little bit with us about that story.
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me. The situation with my brother, well, it's really my brother and my uncle as well. So it's two family members, yes. They're missing at sea since January 6, 2017. That was the last time we heard from them. They're sailing back to Jamaica from the Bahamas and should have arrived in Port Antonio on around the 8th of January, but they have not, and we don't know what happened to them. Nothing has been recovered since the time. No body parts, pieces of the boat, nothing. No, there's nothing conclusive as to what has happened to them.
Wow. Bishop Ffriend, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, so Jana was just sharing a little bit of a background story on her brother and his going missing, which is a terrible story, terrible thing to experience. I cannot imagine what that must be like. But in your experience, what are some of the reasons that persons go missing, and some of the ways that persons go missing? Because Jana mentioned that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty around what happened to her brother. In your experience, though, what are some of the ways, though, that persons go missing, or reasons behind it?
All right. There's a vast plethora of reasons, but they can be put in certain categories. So there is the one that we most fear, which is usually foul play. Yes, and so that is very often a cause. Sometimes it's an issue of mental health challenges. And so it may just be that because of these mental health challenges, the person is unable to find their way back to wherever it is that they should be or would normally be. There are sometimes cases where it may be an accident. So it's not foul play, but it could be an accident that could result in, of course, the person being dead or being injured and in a place that no one knows exactly, for example, where they're from, etc., are not able to make the connections. There's also a case where Sometimes persons just want a new life. Sometimes for different reasons, persons decide that, I want a fresh start and I need to just get out of this situation, start over. And so sometimes persons who go missing intentionally because they are seeking to escape something. Yes, those are some of the broader categories that they tend to fall in. Of course, each case is different and there are many different reasons within those categories, but those are some of the broader ones that we tend to see.
Okay. So back to you, Jana. How is it the initial notification when you realized that something was amiss? How was that for you and your family?
Yes, well, they should have arrived about 2 days after they departed the Bahamas. And I remember there was a Sunday afternoon when my mother called me and said that she can't hear from them, that they should have reached Port Antonio by now and she can't hear from them. And I mean, you kind of go numb, a sort of a chill. And
yeah.
I think I remember crying a little bit at that point because I was just a sense of fear. And indeed,
Yeah.
So yes,
Wow.
that's what happened. We didn't realize that we couldn't get through to them. There were times during the journey when they were out prior to departing on the 6th of January that we're able to speak to them on the phone. And so when Mommy didn't hear from them at all, that's when we realized. And in trying to call them, couldn't get through. We notified the relevant authorities out here to try to launch a search at sea for them.
Prior to getting that confirmation, it's now the appointed date and time. They have not arrived in Port Antonio. Was there any sort of inclination, either on your part as a sibling or on the part of your mom, that hey, something is, I'm feeling a little unsettled, something is off? Did you have an experience like that prior to getting confirmation something was off?
I didn't. I really didn't. I pick up any vibe. I did not get a sense that something was wrong. I'm not sure if my mom did though. Quite possibly, because it's her brother and her son, double for her. So quite possibly she did, but that she didn't necessarily share. But I really didn't.
Okay. So, Bishop, in a situation like that, where you get that initial just earth-shattering news that something, your loved one cannot be found. There are no answers. There are no indications that anything is one way or another. So now there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. How does someone navigate that and kind of remain grounded and start to actually action the mechanics of it? And you make the phone calls and you do the due diligence and checks. But how do you not go the opposite route, which has just become so emotionally overwhelmed that you almost lose control of the situation, so to speak?
That is actually one of the most difficult things to deal with. The loss that comes with a missing person is what we call an ambiguous loss. It's an unconfirmed loss. And it is therefore seen as the most stressful type of loss to deal with because it defies resolution. Yes. It is, there are some persons who tend to say that, okay, this is more like grief, but it isn't really, because grief has a certain finality to it. It has a certain closure, right? This situation doesn't allow that. And so it is more akin to trauma. Yes, and what we see are usually the results that are experienced from post-traumatic stresses. Yes, and so it is really very difficult. It requires significant support. It requires significant grounding. In the initial stages, usually we find that the families are so caught up in the crisis because initially it is just a major crisis. right? And so at that time, it usually takes over everything else. Yes, it takes preeminence in everything else. And so dealing with that, trying to remain calm and working through that is really not the easiest thing to do. And so at that time, you need as many persons who are able to understand to help you to navigate that. And I say are able to understand because sometimes people do not know necessarily what to say or how to respond in a time like this. Yes.
Well, I love that you've touched on that point of, I use the term support system. Jana, how important was that for you, especially in the initial hours and days after being aware that something has happened and your brother can't be located? How important for you was that support system to get you through those days?
Yes, it was absolutely important. I think without that, we really would have been a much more difficult situation for the whole family. But we're so grateful. We had a lot of, neighbors, extended family, friends who are family, co-workers, that sort of thing. Reached out, who made themselves available in many ways. I remember friends, sending food, coming over to support, calling, coming, different ways. Friends offered to stay by me if I wanted company and that sort of thing. But yes, as Bishop says, some people are unsure of what to say. And sometimes you don't have to say anything at all. Some people feel like I don't know what to say, and they kind of avoid you. But sometimes there are no words, and sometimes nothing is required to be said.
Yeah. For you, if you were to give someone who is on the outside looking in and wants to be supportive of someone who is going through an experience similar to what you've been through, what would be a couple of things that you would say to them to help them to be as best a support system as they can be? Because as you said, sometimes we just don't know what to say. But what are the things you mentioned? Just being present. But what are a couple other things that you think are beneficial in that space?
Sometimes it's just not asking any questions. I found sometimes that the questioning made it a lot harder because we don't have any answers. And I know sometimes people were just trying to understand for themselves, but it was the questioning that I think made it that much more to try to process and to understand, to be able to explain to somebody else. That was hard. So I would say avoid some of the questions, and it's not so much for friends and stuff to understand, but just to be supportive. So yes, so being there, just checking up, text message, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you. I had friends who were fasting for us as well, and just letting us know that that's what was happening. As I said, some friends offered food, brought food over, to my parents, or asked me what food I would want to eat. People physically came over, offering somewhere to stay for company, and just little things in different ways like that. Just a quick checkup and stuff, but not all the time it requires speaking about the situation, because yes, there are other things about life that are still going on too. So there are different ways.
But those are some very, very important pointers, and I think we can apply those to this grief in general. Just don't pepper us with the questions. Be supportive. Absolutely, food is a definite good thing. Can't go wrong with the food. So, Bishop, Jana just touched on some very important tips to just for the village, my word, to support someone who is going through something like this. But from an emotional perspective, in terms of the family and those who are having to cope with this and this tremendous uncertainty, what are some of the things that they can do for themselves to remain healthy and mentally healthy, physically healthy as they navigate this season?
All right. Well, as it concerns dealing with this, first of all, I would like to separate it in two parts. The first 6 months, that's usually considered the crisis period. Yes. And then after that first 6 months, which really deals with that coping and waiting and hoping. During the first 6 months, there are a few things that they really need to try very hard to do. First of all, literally taking it a day at a time. During that crisis period, it is very important to just deal with the moment. Because the bombarding of the psychological impact, the thoughts and the what ifs and etc. can prove to be very overwhelming. It can move them into what we call a dark place. So we recommend that you try to deal with a day at a time. Take each day. And interestingly, I'm going to use a term that might seem strange in the setting, but actually celebrate each day. In other words, having made it through the day, in your own way, just celebrate the fact that, okay, we've made it through this day and seek to pull strength from that for the next day. You will find that sleep will seem to evade you for most persons, but it is important, again, in that crisis period, to seek to get rest as much as is possible. And what that will mean is that sometimes you'll not be able to work with your usual rest schedule, but whenever you feel that you're tired and you can fall asleep now, take the sleep. What that then means is that the family, as much as possible, needs to work as a team so that you can know that, okay, at this time when I'm probably sleeping for an hour or two, it doesn't mean that the search hasn't continued. It doesn't mean that the work hasn't continued because there are others who are carrying on. But there has to be that sort of support to ensure, because again, if you're not sleeping, that's going to be creating even greater challenges. Yes. And so talking to each other also. Talking to each other, sharing amongst yourselves in the safe zone of the family. Yes, sharing your thoughts and removing some of the ambiguities so that at least within the close group, there is that freedom to express the fears, to express, because sometimes one of the things that affects the family is the fear to speak of their fears. Yes. And so what is it that you're worried that may have happened, etc.? But there needs to be that space for that outlet. So that's another thing that they can do as a family to help to support themselves through this. All right. And that's during the crisis portion. I don't know if we have time in this section to deal with afterwards, but during the crisis period, making sure that you rest, making sure that you have that safe zone and you speak to each other. These things help to take you through it. Dealing with it a day at a time helps you to deal with it so that you do not become overwhelmed.
Yes. Okay. Well, we do have a couple more minutes, so you can continue, Bishop.
Oh, okay. Now, as it concerns going beyond what is considered the crisis, and it is not that it is set that this is a crisis time. It's just that experience has been that usually at about 6 months, the support wanes. Yes, you find that people outside of the inner circle tend to move on. You tend to find that the agencies, etc., are not searching as hard, because life continues with all these other issues that go on for them. And so at this point now, the family needs to now be looking on how do we move forward. And you notice I use the term forward and not on. Because moving on suggests closure. But then with this, there is no closure. So there's a moving forward. It is moving forward while still maintaining hope, while still believing that, okay, there will be some resolution. And as you seek to move forward, again, I spoke earlier about the sharing, the discussions, the stories, but then also one thing that we've found that helps is a celebration of the life and impact of the person. Not a celebration in the form of a memorial, but a recognition that this person is a valuable part of our lived experience. And so it can be in major ways or in simple ways. It could be just listening to his or her favorite song sometime and just relaxing and listening to it and remembering, the times that you've had together. It may be having a collage, having a collage in a particular place. It might be on the birthday or special days, having a family event and just sharing, but sharing from the perspective of this is what he or she has been to us so far. And the so far is important. Yes. And so as we do that, you find that you're able to keep the person in your life. You're able to be moving forward. You're able to be enjoying the blessing of the gift that this person has been to you so far, but you're also not giving up hope because it is a so far.
When you say celebrating the blessing of this person, someone may say, how can we be talking about celebrating and referring to this life experience being a blessing when there has been this interruption in their life experience? Quickly, how do we bridge that narrative? Because it almost sounds a little, how does that fit into the equation? But talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, this interruption, I like the fact that you use the term interruption, because if it is an interruption, it says there were things happening before. And the very reason that we miss the missing person, and pardon the play, but the very reason we miss the missing person is because of the impact that they had on our lives. It is because of the valuable space that they have taken in our lived experience. And so we are saying, it is basically a way of saying, we are not forgetting you, we have not given up on you, and also we have not lost touch of who you have been to us so far. So we celebrate what you have done, we celebrate who you've been, we celebrate the impact you've had on our life, and we look forward to the possibility of an addition to these experiences.
Okay, all right. I see the perspective now. Jana, has that been your experience, being able to be joyful and celebrate Javan's life and his experience, and even though there has been this interruption? Quickly.
Yes, well, we're grateful, of course, for all the years we had with him. And yes, we do look forward to more. And part of the difficulty with it, I guess we may be able to continue after the break, is not being sure what tense to use. Don't want to use was, you were, yes. We, that sort of thing. So that's where the ambiguity comes in, right, Bishop?
Okay. All right, we'll stick it right there. We're definitely going to pick this back up after the break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on the topic still missing, still waiting. So I want us to pick up back where we paused before the break. Jana, we were speaking about one of the challenges you experienced in terms of how do you refer to your loved one? Do you say was, use past tense? You don't even know how to communicate when referring to this individual? Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. So in the first few maybe weeks and months, maybe in the same crisis period that Bishop referred to, those first 6 months, I remember sometimes when some family friends or so would say Javan was, or I know he was, and I'd be like, excuse me, oh, you're clearly saying that you feel he's dead, and that kind of thing. I wouldn't actually say it back to them, but internally I'm like, no, really. Mm-hmm. So even though it's still, I try, I don't use was. He is taller than me, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because yes, as you said, Teresa, earlier, there's still hope. You'll always be hopeful until you get some DNA thing showing that this is the person's remains and they're gone. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is with this situation.
So I want us to talk a little bit more now about what have been some of the experiences for you and your family in terms of the challenges navigating the early phase, I guess, using Bishop's timeline, the first 6 months, and then what have the challenges been like as you've moved through the various seasons till we are where we are today?
Right. Let me try and go back a little bit. So yes, it's certainly the first two week or two, there's this aspect about being able to find them quickly because they may need rescuing. So you feel this, there's this thing of, you know, you have to do everything you can because they could very well be on some island, they're stranded and need to be found before they starve to death or, you know, whatever. So that's part of the difficulty with the situation, because yes, if you knew for sure that they're drowned at sea or something, you wouldn't, those efforts you wouldn't put out those efforts because you would know, you know, that it's too late, that sort of thing. So yes, there's that issue of you know, that urgency and the need to try to do as much as you can quickly to rescue them. So as the time passes now, yes, there's other things of, you know, where could they be, what has happened. And then, well, for me personally, what's when I now hear about, you know, fishermen being rescued and boat being held and agreements or so that the government has signed, and thing you hear, well, this could have happened to them, and, you know, you start to say, how come other people are rescued? How come, you know, why is it that they couldn't have been found and rescued, or up to now have not been found and rescued? You know, we hear sometimes there's another incident, the ship went drifting and I think it caught fire, but the women were rescued and stuff. And you get that aspect of it as well, that you hear so many instances or situations where persons are found, rescued in whatever state they happen to be in. But that has not been the case for us. So that has been part of it as well. You know, we come to last week, there's stuff in the news about shipwright agreement and right, that for fishermen found and what has happened to the boat was destroyed and so, you know, that kind of thing. You know, just like, wow.
What about me?
Yeah, how come? Why not us?
Yeah. Well, we talked earlier about the importance of your support system, and I like to use the Jamaican term, your village. But we know that humans aren't necessarily always empathetic, compassionate, supportive. Have you, in navigating these months and years, had those sort of negative interactions that made you kind of go, okay, like, how do you not get it? And how have you overcome those, if that has actually, you've actually had those experiences where persons maybe are insensitive, whatever the case may be?
Well, two situations jump to mind. One was, as you say, a family friend. I don't remember exactly when it was in the course of the last 4 years, but he was sort of in a sort of way of amusement asking, is your brother okay now? Is he all right now? Everything's sorted out with the boat, or he's all right now? That sort of way. And I kind of looked at him. I was like, no, this is serious, you know. I said, no, we don't find them all now. And immediately his disposition changed to what? Because some people, I guess, just didn't appreciate that it wasn't just a little mishap or something. This is, they are missing for 4 years, you know. And it was 4 men on the boat, so my brother, my uncle, and 2 other men. And nothing has been heard. You know, we haven't heard from them or found anything of the 4 of them. Another time, well, it wasn't so much insensitive. It's just I don't like the word that was used. A colleague asked if, well, when I said to him about 4 men, and he said, 4 of them perished. And I don't use the word perished because that also, as Bishop was saying, that sounds like you've gotten an answer, you know what has happened, and we don't know what has happened. So yes, all 4 could very well be dead, but I'm not going to say perished because I do not know that for sure. So that's just sort of the difficulties navigating the situation. Also, I don't know what word to use to describe what we're experiencing. I can't say grieving, I can't say mourning. You know, I just don't know what is the word in the English language to use to describe, you know.
Yeah. Bishop, what would you say is the best way to describe this suspended state? Or best terminology?
Well, we still call it trauma. Okay. And so we call it a post-traumatic stress experience because it is traumatic, and the results certainly more closely resemble trauma than grief because of, as we said before, the fact that there is no closure there. Of course, what we sometimes have in the extended period, though, is what we call a return to crisis. And so from time to time, there's a return to crisis that's caused by various things. For example, possible sightings. Yes. And you know, if there's a possible sighting, then there's a return to crisis mode, basically, or there is location of remains in an area that would be considered, you know, this might be where they would have been. Yes, or of course sometimes things as simple, quote unquote simple, as anniversaries or birthdays, yes, or special moments, yes. These special times, when these times come around, there is also that return to crisis. So there's really the trauma, and then there is the dealing with the trauma afterwards, the post-traumatic experience. And of course, we find that very often the families tend to be, I heard Jana saying it, you know, tend to be stuck in time. Yes, they're basically stuck in time, and they're not sure, okay, do we grieve or do we wait? And then they have to deal with the guilt issues of if they even think that, okay, probably by now, okay, probably there's no reason to hope. Then they start having the internal conflict because they start feeling guilty also about it. So it's really a traumatic experience.
Okay. So, all right. You touched on something, and I would love to Jana, get your feedback on it. How has it been for you navigating January 6th each year, or a birthday, or any other significant date that represents your brother? How has it been each year having to go through that?
Well, certainly on the anniversary date, that's January 6th, the last time we heard from them. My mom likes to go out by the sea and sort of just look out, you know. I think we might recite a poem, that sort of thing, and we take pictures. So I think for 2 years I missed that purposely. I didn't think I could manage, but this year I went. The first Christmas, I was fearful that something may have triggered all of the family to, like, you know, become emotional and cry. But as it turns out, it was just me. I was the only one who, everybody else, you know, was strong and able to manage. I was the only one. Like, it was like, okay. So sometimes, you know, the things would trigger it unexpectedly too. But certainly for his birthday, you know, I post a picture on my WhatsApp, and, you know, that kind of thing is never forgotten. And we have our cousins group on WhatsApp, and, you know, we say happy birthday, and, you know, we love you, and that sort of thing. And for my uncle's birthday as well. Because those cousins, you know, with their father.
Yes, their father.
So, right. Because, yes. So, you know, you still observe the special occasions and stuff. But, you know, they're difficult at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here. How long should one keep hoping? And when should one finally just release? Bishop, you want to take this one first? And then, Jana, I'd love your feedback on as well.
Sure, I'll take it. And the answer in my mind is simply, there is no set time. That is left up to the person. Unfortunately, because we do not generally like ambiguities, and so society likes to be able to put things in its particular perspective and move on, we tend to feel that we need to say to persons, okay, it's time to move on now. It's time to give up now, etc. And we have the same thing even with grief. And so there are persons who will tell you that, no, but you should get over it by now. You should stop grieving by now. There is no set time. Each situation is different. And it is up to the family members and loved ones to determine at what point they are prepared to say, well, okay, I am going to be accepting this as closed. Now, in other words, even though the law sets a time at which the person can be declared legally dead, that is an issue of legality, and that will allow for dealings with the affairs, estate, etc. But that has nothing to do with the psychological part of it. It is totally up to the persons, and we should give them that space. We should allow them that freedom, and we should show empathy and sympathy. Give them the space. It is their loved one. It is their experience. They must decide.
Yes. Jana, what's your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with Bishop. Yes, I think for the rest of my life, until there's some DNA thing showing that this their remains, or whatever.
Mhm.
I will hope that there's some cool Hollywood ending of maybe a weather beaten 60-odd-year-old face turning up and having made his way around the world or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but because I think that's just the human experience, or just what you need to hope.
Mhm.
And I will be hopeful. You know, I don't say to myself, okay, but by year 10, you
Mhm.
must start whatever. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, also for our family, we've never had a memorial service. We've never had
Mhm.
certainly like no funeral, anything
Mhm.
like that. We haven't had
Absolutely.
any church thing recognizing the situation or
Mhm.
anything like that. So from that perspective,
Mhm.
that still hasn't happened yet either.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may though, I would just also like to quickly add
Mhm.
that for all those who are hoping, it's important that we also recognize that even in the eventuality of the person's returning, the reality may not resemble the hope. And that is also something that we have to try to prepare for, because the return, the hope may not be resembling the reality in the case of the return.
Well,
That's a good
Bishop,
point.
you have touched on the exact next point that I was going to raise. So this is perfect timing. But I just want to invite our listeners, before we move deeper into that, to keep your comments and your questions coming. We absolutely want to hear from you. What makes you still hope for your missing loved one's return? Send us your WhatsApp text and voice notes, no longer than 30 seconds, to 876-997-3125. Or you can post your comments on the Love 101 Facebook page, or you can call our studio lines at 876-968-8327 to 8 to participate. So, Jana, you were saying.
Yes, no, the bishop raised an important point. Yes, and it's something I have been mindful too, and maybe that's where the whole stuck in time thing kind of it plays up again, because yes, um, certainly if when again what language to use, he
Mm-hmm,
does return, he could never be the same person as when he
mm-hmm,
left. What has he been going through, or did he go through?
mm-hmm,
We have been dealing with a trauma, as Bishop explained. What has it been like for him? So we have to be prepared for that as well. So it continues. It will never, the situation is a continuous one,
yeah.
definitely.
Bishop, what are some practical ways that someone can prepare themselves for that reality that we're hoping for our loved ones return? They do come back, but they come back a different person. How can one prepare themselves for that?
Oh, that is probably the $1,000,000 question. It
I ask
is.
$1,000,000 questions.
All right, it is difficult in a sense, because you really do not know what you're preparing for. And so the greatest way to be prepared is to seek to have an open mind. And so one of the things that helps is, if as you think of, as you hope, as you expect the return, you try not to focus on a particular picture or view of what this return will be like and what the person will be like, so that you do not get too connected to a particular narrative which may not prove to be the reality. And so seek to think only of having the person back in your life, and seek to condition your mind that you will be so happy for their return, that irrespective of what the story was, their return will be more important to you than the story.
Mm-hmm,
Yes, and that takes a reconditioning, a reframing, we call it a reframing of that mindset.
mm-hmm,
Because otherwise we might get attached to a particular narrative And then we find that, the reality goes so contrary to that narrative that you go through an entire new trauma having had the return. Yes, I'll use an example. What if, having suffered and hoped and cried and all of this for 10 years, the person returns and you then find out that this person intentionally went missing? Now, if you didn't prepare your mind to be happier about the person's return than about the story, then you may not be open to even understand what went on in their mind when they made that sort of decision. You may just go into a new trauma as you get angry and all of that because of the pain that they caused you, that you think that, they were unfair and unthinking, etc., etc. And, that's just one example. Yes, sometimes depending on what they may have gone through, they may come back a different person because psychologically they may have been impacted in significant ways. They could be having psychotic breaks, etc. And so we need to prepare for that.
No, flipping that, we're saying, how do we cope with our hope being manifesting and on our loved one returning and them being a different person? But on the flip side of that, now, how does one cope when they have run out of that hope and they now get that closure and conclusion that unfortunately their loved one is deceased? How do you go from that extended, suspended state of trauma to now having to shift into a process of grief? How does one navigate that in a healthy way, that is?
Is that me again?
Yes, that's you.
All right. The switch from that experience of that trauma into grief is actually natural. Okay. Once it is, you've gotten what you consider irrefutable proof. And notice I say what you consider, because again, especially after you've been hoping for that long, sometimes what scientists would consider irrefutable proof, what others would consider irrefutable proof, you may find that you disbelieve it. There are conspiracy theories, etc. And sometimes that's just a part of your coping mechanism, because having hoped for so long, you find it difficult to give up that hope. But once it is you've gotten to the point where you've accepted that the loved one is in fact deceased, then you will automatically move now into the grieving process. Now, where I think the biggest challenge presents itself is for those persons, especially for those of us who are believers, whom we were certain that God was going to do it. God was going to present our loved one back to us alive. And we prayed and fasted, probably received words of prophecy and encouragement, etc. Then now when you get to this point where that which you had not anticipated has become the reality, then there are the issues of your faith. How do you handle now this seeming attack on your faith? How do you handle your relationship with this God whom you trusted and believed in to do this for you, but after having you wait all this time, you now find out it didn't happen? And of course, one of the things, again, with that is the issue of setting the mind beforehand. Yes, we don't tend to pay attention to it a lot in church. The what if, we tend to think that what if is a lack of faith, but what if is actually a place of submission, where this is what we want, God, we believe in you for this, but we accept that you're sovereign. And so whatever you do, we say yes. That was what the Hebrew boys said. We know that God can deliver. We believe that he will, but if he does not, he's still our God. Yes. And that is where I think the work needs to be done. As it concerns the grieving, persons will come again at that point. The support system will show up again at that point, and we'll go then through the grieving process as is usual. And hopefully there will not be complicated.
Okay. All right, John, I have the closing question for you. In this experience, have you encountered any local agencies, organizations, support systems that are operational, that if persons who are going through something like this, who have a loved one who is missing, that they can turn to for support, resources available? Is there anything that you could share with us that you may have encountered?
Actually, I haven't. Other than the agencies that were dealing with the search at sea and stuff, with the Coast Guard. No, but perhaps we haven't explored that enough as a family, maybe. So I couldn't say what is out there. Okay.
Bishop, are you aware of any such organizations that are in existence to offer support?
Not really. There is one, I'm forgetting the exact name right now. They deal with missing children.
Okay.
And they provide support for that. I think I'm forgetting the name right now. It's actually a known organization, but they deal with missing children. I do not know of any support group for adults, for missing adults. And if I may just quickly say, that's one of the things that we also recommend, that as family grows during the moving forward, these are some of the things you look on in growing. So how do I form a support group or be a part of a support group, become a lobbyist, going to develop a foundation, philanthropy, etc., as a part of helping to ensure that there's a greater support system for others.